If you would have told me that trying to manage a full time job, family, two kids, newborn baby, making sure you were keeping up with your YouTube videos and trying to make sure you keep up with the podcast you try to keep regular, and how difficult all of that together would be, I probably would tell you it's pretty easy, but it's really not. So, yes, it is nice to have another entry up. It is nice to be back in the saddle, getting another one out there. I have missed this. It's just finding the time to do it all. If you follow me on YouTube, you'll see that, I was short on at least 2 videos so far. One was kind of out of my hands. I had a power outage in my area that kind of left me immobile for at least 2 days. And then the one before that I had missed was because, of course, the birth of my newborn baby. He's a month old now. He is adorable. I love him to death. I now have 2 sons. They are the reason I do any of this, because I just kind of want to show them that, if you work really hard, you can kind of leave a legacy that you might be proud of. And one of the things that I love in this world, as I've said before, is just movies. So being that I love and I'm passionate about films and about talking about films and film history and things like that, once my first son was born, that kind of put me into that direction. So that's why I like trying to do this as much as possible. Of course, it's been about 2 months, I think, since the last one. So I do apologize for my regular listeners. I appreciate you still for sticking around and for waiting for this one. And of course, we're going to bring it back a little bit old school, because I've been doing this thing at work now where I've been trying to kind of take a break from just nonsense YouTube scrolling and watching whatever the most random thing is, because it'll start with something as simple as the top 10 video games of last year, or check out these 30 new gadgets on Amazon under $20. And then it goes really deep into watching silent Korean street cooking videos and people building huts out of dirt in the middle of the forest. If you know what I'm talking about, but if you don't know, you are way better off than I am, because I go down those rabbit holes every night. So I decided while at work I was just going to do something a little different. I don't just kind of just blasting music, because I feel like I wind up pausing it half the time anyway, because music kind of distracts me a little, unless it's music that I put on for when I'm writing. And if I'm not writing, I kind of like to save that music from when I'm writing, so it puts my brain in the zone. So I have this playlist of video game soundtracks and certain movie soundtracks. The 2 that are on there are the soundtrack from The Revenant, which is phenomenal, and then the soundtrack from The Last of Us, which is also phenomenal. So I play those 2 when I'm doing any writing, and that kind of helps me focus. So when I'm at work, I can't really use that for that, because I like to use it when I'm doing my other craft. So if I'm not going to do YouTube, what am I going to do? Well, I'm not going to watch videos of myself. I watch random movies. So I've been going through the free movies that YouTube kind of has to offer, and I went down this whole string over the last week of all these random movies. I watched Clue. I watched Short Circuit 2. I totally skipped 1. I didn't even bother to try to find 1. 2 popped up first, so I just put 2 on. What else did I watch? I watched The Negotiator. I watched Ghostbusters. I watched such random things. And this was another one that I watched, The Last Dragon. Probably one of the underdog martial arts films of the 80s, because it kind of was just not really taken 100% seriously at the time, because it was just sort of this play on the idea of the popularity of Bruce Lee and kind of just doing this other version of it. But in all actuality, this movie is fantastic. I grew up on this movie. I love this movie. But watching it now for the first time in, I want to say, a decade maybe, I'm realizing the story of this movie is fucking crazy. When I tell you that the story of this movie is just complete bananas, just listening to what it is on paper. I'm watching the movie, and of course I'm enjoying it. I'm not saying that you can't find enjoyment in this movie still. It is a cult classic. It is one of the, best 80s action, Bruce Lee comedy action parodies out there. I believe you pronounce his name Tamak. Tamak is great in it. The guy who plays Shogun is great in it. The pop star Vanity is great in it. Everybody in that film is just great in that film, and it is cheesy and it is glorious, but the story is really, really stupid. So what is the essential story of The Last Dragon? Well, in all honesty, it's about like Leroy Green trying to become the master. And that's such a subplot to the rest of the thing. That's just what his sort of journey is. But what he gets wrapped into is what the movie is based on. So what he gets wrapped into is, while he's just kind of perusing the streets of where does it take place? Harlem. It takes place in Harlem. So he's just perusing the streets of New York, and he notices the showrunner of this TV program, Laura Charles, gets trying to get kidnapped, and essentially saves her from being kidnapped, because that's what his teaching has told him, to be good to others and to use your skills to, for justice in a way. And so he stops them. But why are they trying to kidnap her? Well, there's this dude who calls himself Eddie Arcadian. He's not like a traditional mafioso or a traditional gangster. He's a dude that I think just owns a bunch of like arcades and is like a businessman, and he just is trying to get like the next big thing. And so he has this girl he's with, this girlfriend, who he wants to have her music video put on Laura's show. So he's going to kidnap Laura to bring him to bring to his studio to show the video and hopefully get it played on her show so we can get worldwide recognition and he can make a lot of money. That's really the plot of this movie. The plot of this movie is Leroy Green gets tangled up in this weird kidnapping money-making scheme that a guy who owns a bunch of arcades is running. And what happens is he foils the kidnapping. Then he drops like his medallion, so she takes the medallion, and he goes to try to get it back, sees that she gets kidnapped again, goes to save her a second time, does save her, beats the crap out of all the guys, embarrasses the Eddie Arcadian, and then he's like, this guy is history. All to try to get a music video played on like whatever this universe's version of MTV or Soul Train is. That's the premise of the story. That's the whole reason anything happens in the movie, is that this guy just stops this pseudo mafioso nobody from kidnapping a woman so he can convince her to play this music video that he produced. That's it. That's the whole plot of this story. And I'm watching this and I'm like, have I just ruined my love for this movie? And I definitely didn't. But when you look at that concept and you read it on paper and you just hear me say it, and maybe it's a poor way of explaining it, but honestly speaking, that is me giving you the best definition of what the storyline for this movie is, and revisiting it now, realizing like I fully understand why this movie went absolutely nowhere when it came out, and then it built up its following over time. It deserves all the praise it gets now, because it is truthfully a fantastic film, but it is a very bad story. It is a very bad plot. It just reeks of just nonsense. Like, then there's this weird like moment where there's a fish tank, and like the fish tank has like this creature who they're afraid eats faces. It's freaking weird, dude. And through the whole time, Leroy Green has this arch nemesis in a way. Calls himself Shonuff. He's kind of just in the background up until Eddie Arcadian decides that he has to really find somebody who can match Leroy, because none of his men can do it. So he finds Shonuff, and Shonuff wants Leroy because they're like the two in the area that are the best. They are each kind of equal in mastery of their craft and mastery of the martial arts. So he constantly wants to fight Leroy, and Leroy wants nothing to do with it. So he sees this as a great way to get to Leroy, and that the way they kind of connect is just, context of the plot moving forward. Like, you can't just have this character disappear, so you make the two of them kind of join forces to beat Leroy. And then who comes to save the day for Leroy when he gets jumped by all the gangsters and Sho'nuff? All the kids from his karate class that he teaches now, and they're just mutilating these dudes that are like 300 pounds, walking around with chains and bats. And yeah, it's campy. It's meant to kind of be kid and family friendly. I get that. But, like, it's still just so ridiculous. And it's so ridiculous that it's great. And I'm not even going to say that I'm never going to watch this movie again, or that you shouldn't watch this movie ever again. But you really have to stop and think how out there this story is, how ridiculous the plot of what moves this story in the right direction. I would have taken, if they wanted to, like, in some way, shape, or form lead up to that big fight between Sho'nuff and Leroy, I would have taken any other path and maybe just totally gotten rid of the Arcadian subplot. Like, maybe that wasn't 100% necessary, but it's also a good incorporation, because how else do you get, I guess, the Laurel Charles character and the introduction of all this great music? The music in this movie is fantastic. It's pure 80s vibe, pop and hip hop and R&B, and just such really, really good music that sets the tone and creates this excellent atmosphere that this movie is just, it just seeps in just goodness. But it's still a movie that wasn't successful at the time. I think it cost like $10 million to make, which is crazy to think about right now. Like, $10 million in 1985. If I remember the last time I did this for a video I had done before, the calculation of that is, I think, times 5.2 or something in today's money. So I think it's like that movie today would have cost $50 million. And the movie only did $33 million. And it doesn't have good reviews like anywhere. This is kind of like if you watched it and if you grew up with it and if it like mattered to you, it became part of your life. Because this movie is going to be part of my life until the day that I die. And I love this film. But it is really, really stupid. It's a really stupid plot. It really does not make any sense. If you told me, if I had never seen this movie before, imagine being a person you're trying to convince to watch this movie for the first time. First of all, I'm a full believer that if you never gave a chance to certain movies that came out during certain time periods, trying to watch those things 30 or 40 years after the fact, I don't even want to say it's 50-50. It's more miss than it is hit. I don't know if I brought this up in other entries before, but there was this time where I had expressed to my wife that I had never watched Legend, the movie with Tom Cruise and Tim Curry plays the devil. I never watched that. It was never a thing that was on my radar. I didn't necessarily care about it. So when I was in my mid-20s, she was like, this is my favorite movie, you got to watch it. So she made me watch it, and I still didn't care about it. It really didn't hit with me, because I feel like that's one of those movies that you have to kind of either grow up with, be raised on, watch during a certain time frame to have a certain level of appreciation for it. Another example that was reversed, I actually did an entry on this a couple of entries ago, was a film called Noises Off from the early 90s. It's got John Ritter, Michael Caine, Christopher Reeves. It's got a great cast, and it's a movie that I grew up with and I love. It's this really great comedy, and I showed it to my wife, and this is, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago I showed it to her, so very, very recently, trying to watch a show from then, we're talking 25 years old. She didn't get it. She didn't like the movie at all. And I was extremely offended, but then I understood why she was probably extremely offended when I said, I don't like Legend. If you don't watch certain movies during that time frame, trying to convince somebody to watch a movie now outside of the era where it was meant to, or outside of just a generational period that it would have become something else for you, try to sit down right now. If you're listening to this and you love The Last Dragon, try to sit down with somebody who's never seen The Last Dragon and explain the plot to them, and then end it by saying it's the best movie ever made. You are going to get one of two reactions. You are going to either get somebody that's going to say, that sounds horrible, I'm going to watch it, or that sounds horrible, why would I watch it? I'm just being honest. I don't see anybody else willing to approach this movie. It's either going to be somebody who it does not sound good to them, and they just want to see the train wreck, sort of like when you first heard about The Room by Tommy Wiseau. I know for a fact that I never wanted to see that. I've seen it once. I'll never watch it again. I never need to watch it again, but I needed to see it. I need to see the three-legged dog. I need to see the train wreck. I need to see it all. So that's an experiment I give out to you. If you love The Last Dragon as much as I do, really sit down, watch it again, then try to explain that plot to somebody who's never seen it before and watch their reaction. I guarantee you it is not going to be what you expect, and it's really going to put into perspective where our kind of taste in movies comes from, I guess. But then again, I think I have great taste in movies, but that's just me.